Have you ever saved for years only to watch someone else spend your dreams in a single day? I'm Olivia Mercer, and for 8 years, I built my future brick by brick while my family treated me like their personal bank. This is the story of how I stopped being an ATM and started being the CEO of my own life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special. For you! The notification from my banking app flashed across my phone screen at the worst possible moment, during the final presentation of my quarter's biggest marketing campaign. I quickly silenced my phone and refocused on the client, pushing away the nagging worry that accompanied any unexpected banking alert. As digital marketing director at Vitality Brands, I'd earned my reputation through unwavering professionalism and results-driven strategies. Today's presentation to Meridian Sportswear was no exception. And that's how we'll increase your social media engagement by 47% within 6 months while simultaneously driving a 28% conversion rate improvement, I concluded, clicking to my final slide. Any questions? The room remained silent for a moment before erupting in enthusiastic questions and comments. 2 hours later, with the contract secured and congratulations from my colleagues still ringing in my ears, I finally had a moment to check that notification. My stomach dropped as I read the message. Withdrawal, $68, $500 from savings account ending in 4721. That wasn't just any savings account. It was my house fund, 8 years of disciplined saving, overtime projects, and bypassed vacations. I'd been just $1,150 away from my down payment goal for a modest condo in the quieter part of the city. And now, over 85% of it was gone. I immediately called the bank, my hand trembling slightly despite my attempts to remain calm. "I'm sorry, Ms. Mercer, but the withdrawal was authorized," the customer service representative explained. "The funds were transferred to a joint account you hold with Barbara Mercer." My mother. The joint account had been created when I was 17, before I left for college. I'd never closed it because it provided an easy way to help my parents when they needed it, which had been increasingly often over the past decade. "This must be a mistake," I insisted, stepping into an empty conference room for privacy. "I didn't authorize any transfer." According to our records, Barbara Mercer visited our Highland Park branch at 10:17 this morning and authorized the withdrawal in person. As it's a joint account, she has full access rights. The conversation continued in circles until I finally hung up, stunned and nauseous. My mother had withdrawn nearly my entire house fund without even mentioning it to me. I tried calling her immediately, but the call went straight to voicemail. Same with my father's phone. My younger sister Vanessa didn't answer either. I stood motionless in the empty conference room, staring out at the city skyline, a view I had hoped would soon be partly mine. At 34, I had spent my entire adult life being the responsible one in my family. When my parents faced foreclosure on their home 6 years ago, I had covered 3 months of mortgage payments while they reorganized their finances. When Vanessa needed tuition assistance after changing her major for the 3rd time, I had provided it. When my father's catering business needed new equipment 2 years ago, I had loaned him the money, most of which remained unpaid. But this was different. This wasn't a loan or assistance. This was my mother withdrawing my down payment without even discussing it. As I drove to my rented apartment that evening, my professional composure finally cracked. Tears of frustration blurred the traffic lights as years of accumulated resentment bubbled to the surface. I had done everything right. Graduated with honors, worked my way up from junior copywriter to director in one of the city's top marketing firms, lived frugally despite my growing salary, saved diligently. Meanwhile, my parents continued making questionable financial decisions, and Vanessa, at 29, still hadn't settled on a career path despite her expensive private university education. My apartment, though tastefully decorated, was a constant reminder of my deferred dreams. The building had thin walls, unreliable heating, and a landlord who viewed maintenance requests as personal affronts. I had stayed there far longer than I should have because every extra dollar went into that savings account, the one that was now nearly empty. After changing into comfortable clothes, I tried calling my family again. This time, my sister answered on the fourth ring. "Hey, Liv," she said, sounding distracted. "Can I call you back? I'm at the bridal boutique." "Bridal boutique?" I repeated, confusion momentarily overriding my anger. "What bridal boutique? For my wedding dress? God, Liv, I've only been talking about it for weeks. Jason and I set the date for August, remember?" Of course I remembered. My sister and her boyfriend of 11 months had announced their engagement during Christmas dinner, much to our parents' delight. Jason came from a wealthy family and worked in commercial real estate. In my parents' eyes, Vanessa had hit the jackpot. "Vanessa," I said slowly, a terrible suspicion forming. "Is Mom with you?" "Yeah, and Jason's mom and my bridesmaids. We're doing the full experience. Dress, accessories, lunch at Emerson's afterward. Mom's being amazing. She..." "Put her on the phone. Now." My tone must have conveyed the seriousness because Vanessa didn't argue. After a moment of muffled conversation, my mother's voice came through. "Olivia? What's so urgent that you're interrupting your sister's special day?" "Did you withdraw $68,000 from my savings account this morning?" I asked, each word precise and controlled. A brief silence followed before my mother responded with practiced casualness. "Oh, that. Yes, we needed to put deposits down for Vanessa's wedding venues and vendors. Everything books up so quickly these days, and with it being a summer wedding, we had to act fast." "You took my house down payment for Vanessa's wedding deposits?" I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. "It's not like that," my mother replied, her tone shifting to defensiveness. "It's a loan. Your father and I will pay you back once the house sells." "What house? What are you talking about?" Another pause. "We've decided to downsize. The market's good right now, and the house is too big for just us. Once it sells, you'll get your money back with interest. My parents' house, the same, one I'd helped save from foreclosure, was a 4-bedroom colonial in Highland Park that had been in steady decline for years due to deferred maintenance. Given its condition, there was no guarantee it would sell quickly or for enough to cover both their remaining mortgage and my loan. "And when were you planning to discuss this with me?" I asked. "We're discussing it now," my mother replied with that familiar tone of dismissive authority she'd used throughout my childhood. "Besides, your sister is getting married. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event. Your house fund can wait a few more months." In the background, I could hear excited voices commenting on what must have been a wedding dress. My vision blurred again, this time with anger rather than tears. "Mom, that money represents 8 years of my life. 8 years of sacrifices and hard work. You had no right—" "Olivia," she interrupted, lowering her voice. "You're being selfish. Family helps family. Your sister deserves her dream wedding, and since Jason's parents are handling the rehearsal dinner and honeymoon, it's only fair we cover the ceremony and reception. We'll discuss this later. I need to get back to your sister." The call ended before I could respond. I stood in my kitchen, phone clutched in my hand, feeling as though the floor had dropped out from under me. For years, I had accepted my role as the family's safety net, the responsible one who could be counted on in a crisis. But this crossed a line I hadn't even thought to establish because it seemed so obvious. No one should take another person's life savings without permission, family or not. As I moved mechanically through my evening routine, the rational part of my brain tried to process what had happened. My parents hadn't asked, they had taken. They hadn't discussed, they had decided. And with that decision, they had effectively pushed my life plans back by years. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Your mother told me you called. Let's talk tomorrow. Family dinner at our house. 6 p.m. Not a question or request, a summons. As always, I was expected to adjust my schedule to accommodate my family's needs. In the past, I would have immediately rearranged any plans to be there. Tonight, I found myself hesitating, thumb hovering over the keyboard. For the first time, I wondered what would happen if I simply said no. Part 2. The family dynamic revealed. I arrived at my parents' house 5 minutes before 6 the following evening, parking behind my sister's new BMW, a pre-engagement gift from Jason that my parents had mentioned repeatedly during our last few family gatherings. The contrast with my 7-year-old Volvo wasn't lost on me as I gathered my laptop, which contained spreadsheets documenting every loan I'd made to my family over the years. Tonight, I wasn't coming unprepared. The familiar 2-story colonial looked impressive from the street, one of the reasons my parents had stretched to buy it 20 years ago when Dad's catering business was experiencing its brief period of true success. Closer inspection revealed the peeling paint on the shutters, cracked paving stones on the walkway, and gutters that needed cleaning. Like much of my family's life, it projected an image that reality didn't quite support. My mother opened the tachuai door before I could knock, wearing an outfit I recognized from her favorite boutique, one I knew was well beyond their budget. "Olivia, right on time as always," she said, kissing my cheek as though yesterday's phone call had never happened. "Your father's grilling on the patio, and Vanessa and Jason will be here any minute." "Jason's coming?" This wasn't a detail my father had mentioned in his text. "Of course! We're celebrating their final wedding venue selections. Wait until you see the photos of the Lakeside Gardens Pavilion. It's absolutely perfect for an August ceremony." I followed her through the house, noting new items that hadn't been there during my last visit 2 months ago. A large sectional sofa replacing their old living room set, an updated entertainment system, framed professional photographs of Vanessa and Jason displayed prominently on the walls. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I arrived at my parents' house 5 minutes before 6 the following evening, parking behind my sister's new BMW, a pre-engagement gift from Jason that my parents had mentioned repeatedly during our last few family gatherings. The contrast with my 7-year-old Volvo wasn't lost on me as I gathered my laptop, which contained spreadsheets documenting every loan I'd made to my family over the years. Tonight, I wasn't coming unprepared. The familiar 2-story colonial looked impressive from the street, one of the reasons my parents had stretched to buy it 20 years ago when Dad's catering business was experiencing its brief period of true success. Closer inspection revealed the peeling paint on the shutters, cracked paving stones on the walkway, and gutters that needed cleaning. Like much of my family's life, it projected an image that reality didn't quite support. My mother opened the door before I could knock, wearing an outfit I recognized from her favorite boutique, one I knew was well beyond their budget. "Olivia, right on time as always," she said, kissing my cheek as though yesterday's phone call had never happened. "Your father's grilling on the patio, and Vanessa and Jason will be here any minute." "Jason's coming?" This wasn't a detail my father had mentioned in his text. "Of course! We're celebrating their final wedding venue selections. Wait until you see the photos of the Lakeside Gardens Pavilion. It's absolutely perfect for an August ceremony." I followed her through the house, noting new items that hadn't been there during my last visit 2 months ago. A large sectional sofa replacing their old living room set, an updated entertainment system, framed professional. Photographs of Vanessa and Jason displayed prominently on the walls. "Did you redecorate?" I asked, already knowing the answer would involve some variation of, "We deserved it," or "It was on sale." "Just refreshing a few things before we list the house," my mother replied, waving dismissively. "First impressions are everything in real estate. Your father's college friend Mark is a stager. He gave us a friends and family discount." On the patio, my father stood at his pride and joy, a high-end grill that had been another necessary investment. 3 summers ago, he wore new grilling attire with the logo of an exclusive golf club, where I knew he occasionally caddied, but certainly couldn't afford membership. "There's my girl," he said, spatula raised in greeting. Perfect timing. Steaks are almost ready. No mention of the $68,000. No acknowledgement of the financial bombshell. Just business as usual in the Mercer household, where uncomfortable realities were glazed over with forced cheer and material distractions. "Dad," I began, "we need to talk about—" "Yoo-hoo! We're here." Vanessa's voice carried from inside the house, followed by the appearance of my sister and her fiancé through the patio doors. She practically bounced across the deck, left hand extended to display her sizable engagement ring, her other arm linked with Jason's. At 29, Vanessa still carried herself with the bubbly enthusiasm of the perpetual favorite child. Her salon-highlighted hair was freshly styled, her manicure immaculate, her casual outfit likely costing more than I spent on clothes in 3 months. "Liv, did Mom show you the venue photos? It's absolutely perfect." She broke away from Jason to hug me, enveloping me in an expensive cloud of perfume. "Not yet," I replied stiffly, awkwardly returning the hug while making eye contact with Jason. Over her shoulder. He at least had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, suggesting he might be aware of the financial situation. "Jason, good to see you," I said, extending my hand professionally when Vanessa released me. We had met only a handful of times since their whirlwind romance began, and I still wasn't sure what to make of him. At 36, he was successful in his field and seemed genuinely fond of my sister, but there was something calculating in his assessment of our family dynamics that made me uneasy. "Likewise, Olivia," he replied, his handshake firm. "Vanessa tells me you secured a major client yesterday. Congratulations." I nodded, surprised that my sister had relayed this information and that he had remembered it. "Thank you, Meridian Sportswear. They'll be a significant account for the agency." My mother emerged from the house with a tray of appetizers that I recognized from my father's catering menu, the expensive ones usually reserved for his highest-paying clients. "Let's celebrate with some champagne before dinner." Jason brought a lovely bottle from his father's collection. The next 30 minutes proceeded like a surreal play, where I seemed to be the only one aware of the underlying tension. My parents and Vanessa excitedly discussed wedding details, the flowers, the live band, the custom-designed invitations, while I sat silently, calculating the approximate cost of each element and watching the invisible total climb well, beyond my stolen down payment. When Jason excused himself to take a business call, I seized the opportunity to address the elephant in the room. "So," I said during a pause in the wedding discussion, "are we going to talk about the $68,000, or are we pretending that didn't happen?" The jovial atmosphere evaporated instantly. My mother's smile tightened. My father suddenly became very interested in the temperature of his grill, and Vanessa looked down at her champagne flute. "Olivia," my mother began in her reasonable voice, "we understand you're upset, but as I explained yesterday, this is temporary. Once the house sells—" "When exactly did you decide to sell the house?" I interrupted. "And why didn't you discuss using my savings before taking the money?" My father turned from the grill, his expression a mixture of defensiveness and the resigned disappointment he'd perfected during my teenage years whenever I questioned family decisions. "The housing market moves quickly," he explained as if talking to a client rather than his daughter. An opportunity opened up in Westview Village, one of those new active adult communities. Maintenance-free living, amenities included. We needed to put a deposit down before someone else claimed the unit. "We want." "So you're using my down payment for your down payment?" I clarified, the absurdity of the situation striking me anew. "And Vanessa's wedding," my mother added, "which frankly takes priority right now. Houses come and go, but your sister only gets married once, I glanced at Vanessa, who had the grace to look somewhat embarrassed, though not enough to offer any solution. "Did you know about this?" I asked her directly. She fidgeted with her ring. "Not exactly. I mean, I knew they were helping with the wedding costs, but I didn't know the specifics of where the money was coming from." "Would it have mattered if you did know?" The question slipped out before I could censor it. "That's unfair," my mother interjected sharply. "Your sister shouldn't have to justify having the wedding she deserves. When you find the right person and decide to get married, we'll do the same for you." The conditional nature of the offer wasn't lost on me. When I conformed to their expectations by finding the right person, then perhaps I too would be deemed worthy of having my parents raid someone else's savings on my behalf. "I don't want a lavish wedding funded by someone else's hard work," I replied. "I want the money I earned to be used for the purpose I've been saving it for over the past 8 years. My father sighed heavily, using the universal signal of paternal disappointment. "Olivia, you've always been so independent, sometimes to a fault. Family supports each other. Your mother and I have sacrificed everything for you girls. Now Vanessa is starting her new life, and we're entering our retirement years. We need to make these changes." "Speaking of retirement," my mother added with practiced casualness, "that's something else we wanted to discuss tonight." A warning bell sounded in my head. What about retirement? My parents exchanged a look I recognized from childhood, the one that preceded financial requests. "The new place in Westview Village," my father began. "It's perfect for our needs, but the monthly fees are a bit more than we anticipated with our current income. We're hoping," my mother continued seamlessly, "that since you're doing so, well, at the agency, you might help us with the mortgage payments until the house sells. Just temporarily, of course." The audacity left me momentarily speechless. They had taken my house fund without permission, and now they were asking me to cover their mortgage payments as well. Jason chose that moment to return to the patio, his business call concluded. He surveyed the tense tableau with the shrewd assessment of someone used to reading rooms. "Everything okay out here?" he asked, moving to stand supportively behind Vanessa. "Olivia's upset about the wedding expenses," Vanessa explained, reaching back to take his hand. "She thinks it's too much." "Not too much for a wedding," I clarified, finding my voice. "Too much to take from my savings without asking, especially when it means delaying my own life plans." Jason nodded thoughtfully. "I can understand that. Perspective. Perhaps we could scale back some elements of the wedding? My parents have offered to contribute more if needed." I saw the flash of horror on my mother's face at the suggestion of accepting additional money from Jason's family or reducing any aspect of the wedding she'd been planning. "Absolutely not," she said firmly. "Everything is already arranged. The deposits are placed. We Mercers pay our own way." The irony of this statement, given that they had used my money to pay their own way, was so staggering that I had to suppress a laugh. "Do you?" I asked quietly, "because from where I'm sitting it looks like I'm the one paying." My father set down his spatula with unusual force. "That's enough, Olivia. We raised you to value family above material things. This attitude is beneath you." That familiar guilt, the weight of being told that my boundaries were selfish, that my desire for financial autonomy was materialistic, settled over me. For a moment, I felt myself slipping into the old pattern: apologize, acquiesce, adjust my own plans to accommodate everyone else's. But as I looked around the patio, at my parents in their new clothes, at Vanessa with her designer purse and engagement ring, at the house they could no longer afford but refused to downsize appropriately, something shifted inside me. I saw with sudden clarity the pattern that had defined my relationship with my family for my entire adult life. I earned, they spent, I sacrificed, they enjoyed, I delayed my dreams, they pursued theirs. And for the first time, I recognized it. Not as family duty, but as profound imbalance. I set down my champagne flute and opened my laptop. Before we continue this conversation, I'd like to show you something I've prepared. The spreadsheet I'd prepared displayed 8 years of financial interactions with my family, meticulously documented with dates, amounts, purposes, and repayment status. The screen glowed with the harsh reality of numbers as I turned the laptop to face my parents and sister. This is a complete record of every loan I've made to this family since I started working at the agency, I explained, my voice steady despite the tension radiating across the patio. The total, not including yesterday's withdrawal, comes to $42,137 over the past 8 years. Of that amount, I've been repaid exactly $5,612. My father's face reddened as he squinted at the screen. Those weren't all loans, some were gifts. I never characterized any of these as gifts, I interrupted, scrolling through the document. Here's the email where you specifically said you'd repay the $4,200 for the new catering van transmission within 6 months. That was 3 years ago. And here's the text message where Mom promised to return the $1,100 I sent for the property. Tax shortfall as soon as Dad's big corporate event paid out. Ah, that was last summer. My mother crossed her arms defensively. Keeping score like this is petty, Olivia. Family doesn't function on balance sheets. Apparently, it functions on the assumption that my resources are communal property while everyone else's are their own, I countered, closing the laptop. I'm not trying to embarrass anyone. I'm trying to establish that there's a pattern here that needs to change. Vanessa, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. I didn't realize you'd been helping Mom and Dad so much financially. Her voice held a note of genuine surprise that momentarily softened my frustration. Perhaps she truly hadn't known. Well, now you know, I said more gently. And now you also know why having my house fund taken without my knowledge or consent feels so devastating. An uncomfortable silence settled over the patio, broken only by the sizzle of neglected steaks on the grill. Jason, to his credit, seemed to recognize the gravity of the situation. He cleared his throat and addressed my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Mercer, I understand your desire to create a beautiful wedding for Vanessa, but perhaps we should reconsider the scale. My parents have always said they're willing to contribute more. We're not taking charity, my father interrupted firmly. It's not charity when it comes from family, Jason replied carefully. And if you're concerned about balance, Vanessa, and I could dip into our savings as well. My sister shot him a look of surprise that told me their finances might not be as merged or as abundant as my parents had been led to believe. Before anyone could respond, my phone rang with a call, from a number I didn't recognize. I would normally have ignored it during a family dinner, but at that moment, any interruption seemed welcome. Excuse me, I should take this, I said, stepping away from the table. Olivia Mercer speaking, I answered, moving toward the side. Yard for privacy. Ms. Mercer, this is Elena Kazarian from Horizon Global Media. The woman's voice carried a crisp professionalism that immediately commanded my attention. I apologize for calling outside business hours, but I wanted to reach you personally. Your name has been recommended to me by several industry colleagues for a position we're looking to fill immediately. I leaned against the garden wall, the family tension momentarily forgotten. I appreciate the call, Ms. Kazarian. What position is this regarding? Executive Director of Digital Strategy for our North American division. It's a newly created role reporting directly to the Chief Marketing Officer. Your campaign work for Meridian Sportswear caught our attention, particularly your integration of traditional brand storytelling with emerging digital platforms. My pulse quickened. Horizon Global Media was one of the largest international media conglomerates, with headquarters in New York and offices in major cities worldwide. A position at their executive level would represent a significant career advancement. That's certainly intriguing, I replied, trying to maintain professional composure despite my surprise. I'm very familiar with Horizon's work, of course. Excellent. We'd like to bring you in for an interview next week, if possible. The position offers substantial growth potential and a comprehensive relocation package, as it would be based at our headquarters in New York. New York, 300 miles away from my current city, from my family. Relocation would be involved, I repeated, processing this information. Yes, is that a concern? Elena asked directly. I glanced back toward the patio, where my family remained in awkward tableau. My parents visibly tense, Vanessa looking uncomfortable, Jason attempting to salvage the conversation. For years, I had limited my job searches to local opportunities, despite knowing that the biggest career advancements in my field often required geographical flexibility. I had stayed because my family needed me nearby. Not a concern, I heard myself say with sudden clarity. Actually, a change of location might be perfect timing. We arranged a video call for the following day to discuss details, and I ended the conversation with a strange mixture of excitement and trepidation flooding through me. When I returned to the patio, 4 faces turned to me expectantly. "Everything okay?" my mother asked, her tone suggesting she hoped whatever call had interrupted our discussion might have magically resolved the tension. "Actually, yes," I replied, sitting back down at the table. That was a recruiting call from Horizon Global Media in New York. They want to interview me for an executive position next week. The reaction was immediate and revealing. My father's expression darkened with concern. My mother's mouth formed a perfect O of dismay, and Vanessa looked genuinely surprised. Only Jason offered congratulations. "That's a prestigious company," he said. "Their digital marketing division is considered industry-leading." I nodded, appreciating his recognition of the opportunity's significance. It would be a substantial step up in terms of responsibility and compensation. "New York?" My mother interrupted, focusing on the detail that clearly concerned her most. "But that's so far away. You can't possibly be considering moving right when your sister is getting married and we're transitioning to a new home." There it was, the immediate reframing of my opportunity in terms of how it affected their plans. "The wedding is still 3 months away," I pointed out, "and it's just an interview at this stage. But if you took it, you'd be leaving, right when we need you most," my father added. "Who would help us manage the house sale and the move?" The question hung in the air, its underlying assumption so transparent that even Vanessa seemed embarrassed by it. Of course, my role in their lives was assumed to be logistical and financial support, regardless of my own career opportunities. "I think what your father means," my mother added hastily, "is that timing is important for family transitions. We've always been there for each other." The selective memory displayed in that statement finally broke through my last reserve of patience. "Have you?" I asked quietly. "Been there for me, I mean. When I was offered the assistant director position 2 years ago and needed to work 60-hour weeks during the transition, who helped? When I had pneumonia last winter and could barely leave my apartment for 2 weeks, who checked on me or brought me groceries?" Their uncomfortable silence was answer enough. "I've built my career through consistent hard work and strategic choices," I continued, finding strength in articulating truths I'd long suppressed. "I've also built my savings the same way. Sacrifice, planning, delayed gratification, and I've done it largely without support, while simultaneously serving as this family's financial safety net." "That's not fair," Vanessa protested. "If I'd known you were sick, I would have helped." "Would you?" I challenged her directly. "The way you offered to help repay part of the money that was taken from my account yesterday?" My sister had the grace to look ashamed. "I didn't know it was your house fund, Liv. Mom just said they were handling the wedding finances." I turned back to my parents. This is the pattern we've established. I succeed through my own efforts, and my achievements become family resources. Meanwhile, my needs are secondary to everyone else's wants. "We're proud of your success," my father insisted. "We've always supported your career." Emotional support isn't the same as practical support, I replied. And right now, what I need is to have my financial autonomy respected. My mother sighed dramatically. So you're choosing career ambition and money over family obligations. I raised you to have different values, Olivia. The guilt trip was so familiar that I almost smiled, not from amusement, but from the sudden recognition of a tactic that had worked countless times before. This time, however, something had fundamentally shifted inside me. The horizon opportunity hadn't just offered a potential job, it had offered perspective, a glimpse of a future where my talents and efforts could be valued appropriately, where my growth wasn't constantly subordinated to others' needs. I'm not choosing career over family, I clarified. I'm choosing to see my career as equally valid to Vanessa's wedding or your retirement plans. I'm choosing to treat my financial security with the same importance you're asking me to treat yours. Jason, who had been observing the conversation with increasing discomfort, finally spoke again. Perhaps we should all take a step back and approach this differently. Mr. and Mrs. Mercer, Vanessa and I appreciate your generosity toward our wedding, but not at the expense of Olivia's financial well-being. We can scale back or contribute more. Ourselves. He turned to me with genuine sincerity. And Olivia, congratulations on the interview opportunity. Regardless of family circumstances, that kind of recognition from a company like Horizon is a testament to your professional accomplishments. His balanced perspective momentarily silenced everyone, his outsider status allowing him to name the dysfunction we'd all been dancing around. For a brief moment, I felt a flash of gratitude toward my future brother-in-law, who seemed to recognize the value of my career in a way my own family never had. My father cleared his throat, uncomfortable with having family dynamics exposed to a relative outsider. Let's eat before the steaks are ruined, he suggested, his standard move when emotional conversations became too intense. We can discuss this more calmly after dinner. As we mechanically went through the motions of the meal, I found my thoughts continually returning to the Horizon opportunity. Beyond the professional advancement, it represented something I'd never seriously considered before: geographical distance from the constant financial and emotional demands of my family. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a life where my achievements didn't immediately become resources for others to claim, where my boundaries were respected because they couldn't be so easily crossed, where my success could be fully my own. The realization was both liberating and terrifying. The prospect of standing firmly in my own worth, not as the reliable daughter, the supportive sister, or the family safety net, but simply as Olivia, opened possibilities I had never fully permitted myself to consider. And as I listened to my parents subtly steer the conversation back to their retirement needs and Vanessa's wedding plans, I recognized that the most significant opportunity before me wasn't just a job in New York. It was the opportunity to finally choose myself. The morning after the family dinner, I woke early and called in to take a personal day from work. For perhaps the first time in my career, I prioritized my personal financial crisis over professional obligations. My boss, understanding the vague family emergency I cited, assured me that the Meridian account was in good hands for a day. Sitting at my small kitchen table with coffee and my laptop, I began a methodical analysis of my situation. As a marketing director, I relied on data and research to guide strategic decisions. Now I would apply those same skills to my personal circumstances. First, I pulled up my complete financial records. Beyond the house fund, I had a modest retirement account, an emergency fund with 3 months of expenses, and a general checking account for daily needs. With the withdrawal, my path to homeownership had effectively been reset to early stages. Next, I researched the current real estate market in my parents' neighborhood. Their assertion that the house would sell quickly seemed optimistic at best, delusional at worst. Similar homes in their area had been sitting on the market for an average of 108 days, and most sold for less than asking price. The dated kitchen, aging roof, and deferred maintenance issues would further complicate their prospects. Then I examined the retirement community they were eyeing. Westview Village was indeed an upscale development with substantial monthly fees. Beyond the purchase price, their desired unit would require not just a down payment, but ongoing association fees nearly double what they currently paid for their mortgage. The math simply didn't work with their income. Finally, I drafted a timeline of my financial interactions with my family over the years, noting patterns I had previously overlooked. The requests had increased in frequency and amount, starting as genuine emergencies but gradually transforming into lifestyle subsidies. My agreement to help had become so automatic that they no longer viewed asking as exceptional. By noon, I had compiled enough information to see the complete picture with painful clarity. My parents had no viable retirement plan beyond selling their house, which likely wouldn't yield the profit they anticipated. Their request for me to cover mortgage payments wasn't temporary. It was the beginning of long-term financial dependence disguised as a short-term need. I was formulating a strategy to address this reality when my phone rang. It was Elena Kazarian from Horizon following up as promised. "Olivia, thank you for making time today," she began after pleasantries. "I've shared your portfolio with our executive team, and they're extremely impressed. We'd like to accelerate the interview process if you're amenable." "I'm definitely interested," I replied, pushing aside family concerns to focus on this opportunity. "What timeline are you considering?" "We'd like to fly you to New York this Friday for in-person meetings with the team. If those go well, we could have an offer prepared by early next week." This was moving faster than standard corporate recruitment, suggesting their interest was serious. Elena proceeded to outline the position in greater detail, its scope, the team structure, and most importantly, the compensation package. "The base salary would be approximately 40% above your current compensation," she explained. "Additionally, there's a comprehensive benefits package, performance bonuses, and as I mentioned, a relocation allowance to facilitate your move to New York." By the end of our hour-long conversation, I had a clear understanding of the opportunity's magnitude. This wasn't just another job. It was a career-defining role that could position me for executive leadership in one of the world's leading media companies. The compensation would allow me to rebuild my house fund within a year while maintaining a comfortable lifestyle in New York. After scheduling the Friday interview and making travel arrangements, I returned to my family financial analysis with renewed perspective. The Horizon opportunity had clarified something important. My reluctance to pursue advancement opportunities requiring relocation had been a self-imposed limitation, one that had likely cost me significantly over the years. I decided to visit my parents' house while they were at work to conduct a more thorough assessment of its condition and market potential. Using the spare key they'd given me years ago for emergencies, I let myself in and began a systematic evaluation. The house revealed even more issues than I had suspected. Water damage in the upstairs bathroom had begun to affect the ceiling. Below, the HVAC system made concerning noises and was at least 15 years old. The kitchen, last updated when they purchased the home, showed its age in worn countertops and outdated appliances. In the home office, I located their financial documents, neatly organized in my mother's meticulous filing system. What I found confirmed my suspicions. Credit card statements showing balances near their limits, insurance policies with minimal coverage, retirement accounts with insufficient balances for their age, and a mortgage that had been refinanced multiple times, extracting equity while extending the payment period. Most concerning was a folder labeled Vanessa's Wedding. Inside were contracts and estimates for venues, catering, floral arrangements, and other services totaling nearly $95,000, well beyond the $6,800 they had taken from my account. My sister's dream wedding was growing more elaborate by the day, with no apparent concern for financial reality. I photographed key documents with my phone, not to invade their privacy, but to have concrete information for the difficult conversation that would be necessary. As I was returning the files to their original locations, I noticed a brochure for Westview Village with handwritten notes in the margins. My mother had calculated monthly expenses that significantly underestimated the actual costs, omitting several mandatory fees clearly stated in the fine print. The final piece of the puzzle appeared when I found a letter from my father's doctor recommending reduced work hours due to stress and early signs of cardiovascular issues. This explained the catering business's recent downturn. He physically couldn't maintain the schedule required for profitability, but rather than adjust his business model, he had simply taken fewer jobs while maintaining the same overhead. Costs. I left the house with a heavy heart but clear mind. My family wasn't being deliberately exploitative. They were desperately trying to maintain appearances and expectations while their financial foundation crumbled beneath them. They had turned to me not just because I was reliable, but because I was their only viable option as reality closed in. Back at my apartment, I created 3 detailed scenarios. Scenario 1. I return to the original arrangement. I forgo the horizon opportunity, accept the loss of my house fund, cover their mortgage payments, and continue as the family financial safety net. This would postpone my own homeownership indefinitely and likely lead to increasing financial obligations as their situation deteriorated further. Scenario 2. I sever financial ties completely. I pursue the horizon opportunity, demand immediate return of my funds, and establish firm boundaries against future requests. This would protect my financial future, but potentially devastate my family's stability in the short term. Scenario 3. I develop a structured transition plan. I pursue the horizon opportunity, but work with my family to develop a realistic financial plan that gradually reduces their dependence while addressing immediate needs. This would delay but not destroy my financial goals, while providing a pathway to healthier family dynamics. As I analyzed each option, I realized that the choice before me wasn't simply financial. It was about fundamentally redefining my relationship with my family and my own future. The easy path, continuing as I had been, would ultimately fail everyone. My parents would never develop true financial independence, Vanessa would never learn responsibility, and I would sacrifice my potential on the altar of enabling dysfunction. The hardest path, complete separation, might protect me financially, but at an emotional cost I wasn't prepared to pay. Despite everything, I loved my family and wanted them to succeed. The middle path, structured transition, would require the greatest effort but offered the best chance for positive outcomes all around. It would mean difficult conversations, established boundaries, and consistent enforcement. It would require me to be firm when emotional appeals were made and clear when ambiguity was attempted. Most challenging of all, it would require my family's cooperation and commitment to change. As evening approached, I prepared for a conversation I had postponed for too long. I texted my parents, "We need to talk about the financial situation honestly. I've done some research and analysis that we should discuss. Can I come over tomorrow evening?" My mother's reply came quickly. "Of course, sweetheart. Dad's making your favorite lasagna. Vanessa and Jason can join us too." I responded with uncharacteristic directness. "This needs to be just the 3 of us initially. It's about the house, fund, mortgage payments, and developing a sustainable plan moving forward. Please don't invite Vanessa and Jason." The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before her response finally came through. "If that's what you want. Is everything all right?" Rather than provide reassurance as I typically would, I answered honestly, "No, everything is not." "All right, but I'm working on solutions that could help all of us if you're willing to make some changes." As I set my phone down, I felt a strange combination of anxiety and liberation. For the first time, I was approaching my family not as the automatic solution to their problems, but as a concerned individual with legitimate needs and boundaries of my own. The prospect of the difficult conversation ahead was daunting, but less so than the prospect of continuing down our current path. My analysis had revealed something important. The patterns destroying my family's financial health were the same ones undermining my own growth. By enabling their avoidance of reality, I was enabling my own avoidance of change. By prioritizing their immediate comfort over long-term solutions, I was doing the same with my career choices. Tomorrow's conversation would be difficult, but it was necessary not just for my financial recovery, but for something more fundamental: my growth into someone who valued herself enough to expect others to do the same. The spreadsheets and scenarios had clarified financial realities, but the true insight was personal. I had been operating under the assumption that saying no to my family meant failing them. Now, I understood that the greatest service I could offer was helping them face reality while modeling the self-respect I wished them to develop. With that realization, I turned my attention to preparing for Friday's interview with Horizon, permitting myself to feel genuine excitement about the opportunity. Whether my family could accept the necessary changes remained to be seen. But one thing had become clear through my investigation: my worth extended far beyond my utility to others, and it was time I acted accordingly. The Manhattan skyline materialized through the airplane window as we began our descent into LaGuardia. I'd visited New York several times for industry conferences, but this trip felt fundamentally different. The city below wasn't just a temporary professional destination, it represented a potential new chapter in my life. The past 2 days had been a whirlwind of preparation. After my methodical analysis of the family financial situation, I had focused my energy on preparing for the Horizon interview. My portfolio was updated, my presentation on digital marketing innovation refined, and my responses to anticipated questions carefully considered. I had approached this opportunity with the same strategic thoroughness I applied to major client campaigns. Elena had arranged for a car service to meet me at the airport. As we navigated through Queens toward Manhattan, the driver, a woman in her 50s named Gabriella, made friendly conversation. "First time to New York?" she asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "No, but first time considering it as more than a visit," I replied. "I have a job interview that could change things." Gabriella nodded knowingly. "I came here 20 years ago from Ecuador, planned to stay 1 year to help my brother with his restaurant. Now I own the car service company and have 3 children in college." She smiled. "New York has a way of turning temporary into permanent. When it's right for you." "How did you know it was right?" I asked, genuinely curious. She considered this as she navigated expertly through traffic. "I didn't, at first. I was afraid to leave my parents. They were getting older, needed help. Sometimes. But my brother said something I never forgot. You can help much better from a position of strength than from one of sacrifice." She glanced back at me again. "He meant that building my own success would ultimately serve everyone better than limiting myself out of obligation." Her words resonated with startling clarity, articulating the conclusion I'd been circling in my analysis. Before I could respond, she continued, "Of course, parents don't always see it that way," she added with a knowing laugh. "Mine were convinced. I was abandoning them. Now they visit twice a year, and I can afford to send them on cruises they never dreamed of taking." The guilt trips stopped after the actual trips began. We arrived at the boutique hotel Horizon had arranged near their headquarters, and as I thanked Gabriella and collected my luggage, she offered a final thought. "Whatever you're weighing, remember that sometimes distance creates perspective that proximity cannot." The hotel room offered a stunning view of the city, the kind that appeared in films about ambitious professionals finding their way. I found myself standing at the window for several minutes, absorbing the energy of a place defined by ambition and reinvention. Here was a city where people came specifically to become more fully themselves, often leaving behind the familiar to embrace the possible. The afternoon allowed time to prepare for tomorrow's interviews and explore the neighborhood surrounding Horizon's headquarters. The company occupied several floors in a sleek glass tower in Midtown, its lobby displaying awards for innovative campaigns I had studied and admired throughout my career. Standing outside the building, I experienced a moment of genuine excitement, untainted by family concerns or guilt, pure professional anticipation of the kind I'd allowed myself too rarely. That evening, I received a text from my mother. "Good luck tomorrow, sweetheart. We're all praying you get this opportunity. Talk to Vanessa about scaling back the wedding. We'll discuss when you return for our meeting." The message was pure. Mom, seemingly supportive while subtly implying that the meeting about their financial situation was still scheduled despite my potential relocation, and that they'd already begun discussing solutions without me. The reference to Vanessa suggested they'd ignored my request to keep our financial discussion private. In the past, I might have felt a flicker of irritation followed by resignation. Today, standing on a Manhattan street corner surrounded by people pursuing their own paths, I felt something different. A calm detachment that recognized the message as a pattern rather than an obligation. I replied simply, "Thank you. Looking forward to our discussion when I return." The brief response represented a small but significant shift. Acknowledgement without commitment. Appreciation without capitulation. Feeling lighter than I had in weeks, I treated myself to dinner at a restaurant that had been on my culinary wish list for years. The solo dining experience, once something I'd have felt self-conscious about, felt like a declaration of independence. Morning arrived with perfect fall weather, clear skies and crisp air ideal for the navy suit I'd selected for the interview. Horizon's offices were even more impressive inside, with open collaborative spaces interspersed with quiet work areas, state-of-the-art technology seamlessly integrated into the environment, and walls showcasing campaigns that had defined digital marketing trends over the past decade. Elena greeted me in the reception area, her handshake firm and welcoming. "Olivia, excellent to meet you in person. We've arranged meetings with key team members throughout the morning, followed by lunch, with our CMO, and an afternoon presentation to the executive leadership." The schedule she outlined was rigorous but exhilarating, a true test of both my expertise and my ability to connect with potential colleagues. As she guided me through the offices, introducing me to staff members and highlighting notable projects, I gained insight into not just the company's work, but its culture. People spoke with genuine enthusiasm about their projects, referenced each other's contributions generously, and demonstrated a collaborative spirit missing from my current workplace. The morning interviews flowed naturally, evolving from standard questions about my experience to substantive discussions about marketing strategy and digital innovation. I found myself engaged in the kind of intellectual exchange I'd been craving, conversations, where ideas were valued for their merit rather than their safety, where challenging existing approaches was encouraged rather than discouraged. During a brief break between meetings, I checked my phone to find multiple messages from my family. "Dad, just got an offer on the house. Lower than asking, but they'll close quickly. Great news, right? Mom, wedding planner needs final guest. Count today. Should we include your +1 just in case? Vanessa, can you help me pick between the band and DJ this weekend? Need to decide ASAP." Their messages betrayed no awareness that I was in the middle of interviews that could change my life, no recognition that I had concerns about the house, sail beyond its speed, no apparent memory of our financial conflict. They existed in a reality where my life revolved around their needs and decisions. I silenced my phone and tucked it away, refusing to let family patterns distract from the professional opportunity before me. The contrast between the dynamic, forward-thinking environment around me and the circular, consumption-focused concerns in those messages could not have been starker. Lunch with Catherine Williams, Horizon's chief marketing officer, proved to be the pivotal conversation of the day. A formidable woman in her late 40s with an impressive industry reputation, Catherine had pioneered digital strategies that transformed how major brands engaged with consumers. "Your portfolio shows consistent innovation within traditional agency constraints," she observed as we discussed my current position. What I'm particularly interested in is how you'd approach our global strategies with fewer limitations. That's precisely what attracted me to this role, I replied. My current position allows for innovation within established frameworks, but Horizon's integrated approach offers opportunities to redefine the frameworks themselves. I outlined my vision for connecting traditional brand storytelling with emerging digital platforms, emphasizing consumer journey mapping and personalized content strategies that respected privacy concerns while enhancing engagement. Catherine nodded thoughtfully. Your approach aligns with our direction. There's something else I'd like to understand, though. Your career progression shows steady advancement, but primarily within one region. What's drawn you to consider a geographical change at this point? The question was professionally framed but personally pointed. I considered a safe answer about career advancement, but something in Catherine's direct gaze invited honesty. Truthfully, I've limited my geographical options out of a sense of family obligation, I acknowledged. I've been the stable support for parents and a younger sister who've struggled with financial management. Recent events have clarified that this arrangement benefits nobody in the long term. Not them, not me, and not the companies I could serve more fully without those constraints. I hadn't planned this level of candor, but as the words emerged, I recognized their truth. Catherine's expression reflected not judgment, but recognition. That resonates with me, she said. When I was offered my first executive position, it required relocating from Chicago, where my recently divorced sister was raising 2 children with significant help from me. The guilt was tremendous, but I made the move with a plan to support differently. 15 years later, my sister runs her own successful business. Her kids are thriving in college, and our relationship is stronger than ever. She leaned forward slightly. Distance created space for everyone to grow. I could advance professionally and support more meaningfully from a position of success, while she developed independence rather than dependence. The parallel to Gabriella's words was striking. This notion that true support might sometimes require stepping back rather than staying close, that success could enable more meaningful assistance than sacrifice. The afternoon presentation to Horizon's executive team built upon the morning's momentum. I presented my analysis of their current digital strategies and outlined a vision for integration and expansion that clearly resonated with the leadership. Their questions were incisive but engaged, focused on implementation rather than validation. As the day concluded, Elena walked me back to the reception area. This has been impressive, Olivia. The team is highly enthusiastic about your potential. Here. We'll be in touch very soon, likely before you even return home. On the way back to the hotel, I found myself viewing the city differently. The buildings weren't just architectural achievements, but symbols of possibility. Spaces where people created futures different from their pasts. The crowds weren't anonymous masses, but individuals who had each made choices that brought them to this place of perpetual becoming. Back in my hotel room, I allowed myself to fully imagine a life here, not just professionally, but personally. A life defined by growth rather than maintenance, by potential rather than obligation, by boundaries that enabled genuine connection rather than resentment-breeding sacrifice. The ringing of my phone interrupted this reflection. It was Catherine Williams. Olivia, I hope I'm not interrupting your evening, she began. I wanted to speak with you directly rather than wait for the formal process. The team was unanimous. We'd like to offer you the position. Despite my hopes, the immediacy of the offer caught me by surprise. That's wonderful news. I'm genuinely honored. We'd like you to start in 3 weeks if possible, she continued. The relocation package includes temporary housing while you settle in and assistance with selling or subleasing your current home. The timeline was aggressive, but exciting. I'd need to give notice at my current position, of course, and address some personal matters. Understood. Elena will send the formal offer tomorrow with complete details. I wanted to convey personally how excited we are about your joining our team. Your perspective is exactly what we need at this juncture. After thanking her and ending the call, I stood by the window again, watching the city transition from day to evening, lights illuminating countless windows in countless buildings. Behind each light was someone who had chosen this place for its possibilities. The offer represented everything I'd worked toward professionally: recognition, advancement, the chance to implement ideas at scale, compensation that reflected my value. But beyond these tangible benefits was something more profound: the opportunity to redefine myself outside the constricting roles I'd accepted for so long. My phone buzzed with another family text, but for once, I didn't immediately look. Whatever crisis or demand awaited could wait until morning. Tonight belonged to this moment of crossroads, this clear choice between continuing patterns that limited everyone involved or embracing change that, while difficult, offered the only path to authentic growth. I hadn't come to New York seeking permission to change my life. Yet somehow, through Gabriella's wisdom, Catherine's example, and the glimpse of potential in Horizon's offer, I had found validation for the conclusion my own analysis had already reached. True responsibility meant making choices based on growth rather than guilt, on possibility rather than pattern. Tomorrow I would return home to have the difficult conversation with my parents, but I would do so carrying not just a job offer but a vision of a different way forward. One where my success became a genuine resource rather than a continually tapped reserve. The professional crossroads before me wasn't simply about a career move. It was about recognizing that the most valuable contribution I could make, to myself, my career, and ultimately my family, was becoming fully who I was capable of being, even if that required breaking patterns that everyone had come to depend upon. With that clarity, I finally responded to my family's messages with a simple text. "We need to talk when I return tomorrow. I've been offered a position in New York and I'll be accepting it. This changes our financial discussion, but not the need to have it. I'll explain everything tomorrow evening." My parents' house looked smaller somehow as I pulled into the driveway that evening. Perhaps New York's towering skyline had recalibrated my perception, or maybe it was simply that I now saw the property through the lens of financial reality rather than childhood nostalgia. I had spent the return flight rehearsing this conversation, anticipating objections and preparing responses. The formal offer from Horizon had arrived by email that morning, comprehensive, generous, and with a timeline requiring decisions sooner rather than later. The salary alone would allow me to rebuild my house fund within 10 months, while the signing bonus could address immediate needs. The relocation package included temporary housing and moving expenses that would ease the transition logistically. It was, by any objective measure, an extraordinary opportunity. But family dynamics rarely operate on objective measures. My mother opened the door before I could knock, her expression a studied mix of enthusiasm and concern. "There's my career girl," she exclaimed, embracing me as though I'd returned from war rather than a business trip. "We've been so excited to hear about your interview." The living room had been carefully staged for this conversation, I realized as I entered. The formal dining room, where tense discussions typically occurred, had been bypassed in favor of the more casual family room. My father waited there in his favorite recliner, a deliberate choice that established his authority while suggesting relaxed familiarity. A tray of my favorite childhood cookies sat on the coffee table, snickerdoodles I hadn't particularly enjoyed since high school, but that my mother persistently believed I loved. "How was New York?" my father asked, his tone carefully neutral, as I took a seat on the sofa across from him. "It was excellent," I replied, deciding to address the professional opportunity directly rather than allowing them to steer the conversation. "Horizon is offering me the executive director position. The package is exceptional, significantly higher compensation, comprehensive benefits, and a substantial relocation allowance. "That's wonderful news," my mother exclaimed with enthusiasm. That didn't quite reach her eyes. "Though New York is so expensive, after taxes and the cost of living, will you really be better off?" The question was vintage mom, seemingly practical while subtly undermining. I had anticipated this line of argument and came prepared. "I've done a detailed cost analysis," I explained. "Even accounting for New York's higher expenses, I'll be able to rebuild my house fund within a year and establish myself more securely than would be possible here." My father leaned forward slightly. "A year is a long time to live in a temporary situation, sweetheart. You know, with the house sale moving forward, we could help you find something affordable locally. There's a nice townhouse development near Westview Village where we could be neighbors." The suggestion was so transparently self-serving that I might have laughed if the situation weren't so serious. They were simultaneously proceeding with plans that required my financial resources while trying to ensure I remained geographically tethered to their needs. "That's actually why I wanted to have this conversation tonight," I said. "The Horizon offer changes the financial situation for all of us. I'll be moving to New York within 3 weeks, which means we need to address several immediate concerns." My mother's expression tightened. 3 weeks? But that's impossible. The wedding is in less than 3 months, the house sale is pending, and we've put a deposit on the Westview unit. You can't just leave right now." "I can, and I will," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "My career advancement isn't something I'm willing to postpone any longer, but I understand this timing creates challenges that we need to address." I opened my laptop and pulled up the financial analysis I had prepared. "I've created several scenarios based on your current situation. The house sale is positive news, but according to my research, it likely won't yield enough profit to cover both the Westview Village down payment and repayment of my funds." My father shifted uncomfortably. "The market's stronger than you might think. Our realtor believes—" "Dad," I interrupted gently, "I've researched comparable sales in your neighborhood extensively. Even at the full asking price, after closing costs and paying off your existing mortgage, you'd clear approximately $110,000. The Westview unit requires a down payment of $85,000, leaving $25,000, far short of the $68,500 taken from my account." My parents exchanged glances, their practiced routine of financial avoidance momentarily disrupted by concrete numbers. "Additionally," I continued, "the monthly expenses at Westview would be approximately $3,200, including the mortgage, association, fees, and utilities. Your combined monthly income is currently $4,700. That math simply doesn't work." "We've managed our finances for 40 years, Olivia," my mother said with an edge of defensiveness. "We don't need our daughter to explain basic budgeting to us." "The evidence suggests otherwise," I replied, maintaining my composure. "You've refinanced your mortgage 3 times to extract equity, maxed out multiple credit cards, and most recently, appropriated my savings without permission. These aren't the actions of people successfully managing their finances." My father's face flushed with a combination of embarrassment and anger. "That's enough. We invited you here to discuss solutions, not to be lectured by our own daughter." "I am offering solutions," I countered, "but they require acknowledging the reality of the situation first." I turned my laptop so they could see the screen, which displayed 3 potential scenarios I had developed. Option 1. You cancel the Westview Village contract, which likely means losing the deposit. You use the house sale proceeds to repay my funds and purchase a more affordable retirement property that matches your actual budget. Vanessa's wedding is scaled back to align with what you can reasonably afford. My mother made a small sound of protest, but I continued before she could interrupt. Option 2. You proceed with the Westview purchase, but on a longer timeline. You repay my funds from the house sale and delay the retirement community move until you've saved an appropriate down payment, perhaps in 2 to 3 years. This would mean continuing to work and reducing expenses significantly. And option 3? My father asked, his tone suggesting he already disliked the first two. Option 3, I convert the taken funds into a formal loan with a written agreement, reasonable interest rate, and structured repayment plan. You would need to demonstrate how you'll meet these obligations with your current income and expenses. I closed the laptop and looked at them directly. What isn't an option is continuing as we have been, with my finances treated as an extension of yours, and no accountability for decisions that affect my future. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken emotions: my father's pride, my mother's anxiety, my own resolution. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice shifting to a softer, more vulnerable tone. Sweetheart, we understand you're upset about the money. But this is about more than money, isn't it? It's about family. Your sister is getting married. We're entering our retirement years. These are once-in-a-lifetime transitions that we should experience together. The emotional appeal was familiar territory, reframing financial irresponsibility as family devotion, recasting my boundaries as emotional abandonment. In the past, it had worked reliably to dissolve my resistance. You're right that it's about more than money, I agreed. It's about respect for my work, my goals, and my autonomy. It's about acknowledging that I have the right to pursue my own opportunities with the same priority you've given to your retirement and Vanessa's wedding. Of course we respect your career, my father insisted. We've always been proud of your accomplishments. Pride isn't the same as respect, I noted. Respect would have meant asking before taking my savings. Respect would mean acknowledging that my relocation is a positive development rather than an inconvenience to your plans. My mother's expression hardened slightly. I'm beginning to think New York has already changed you. Since when did you become so cold about family matters? The accusation was designed to sting, to reactivate the guilt that had governed our relationship for so long. Instead, it crystallized something important for me. I'm not being cold, Mom. I'm being clear. There's a difference. Clarity might feel cold when it disrupts comfortable patterns, but it's ultimately kinder than allowing harmful dynamics to continue. My father sighed heavily, adopting the world-weary expression that typically preceded his most effective guilt trips. I never thought I'd see the day when my daughter valued a corporate job over her family's well-being. Your grandfather would be heartbroken to see what's become of his legacy of family loyalty. The invocation of my grandfather, who had worked 2 jobs to put my father through college and whom I had deeply admired, was calculated to strike at my core values. 6 months ago, it might have worked. Today, with the perspective gained through my analysis and the horizon opportunity, I saw it differently. Grandpa taught me that loyalty means helping others become their best selves, not enabling behaviors that ultimately harm everyone, I replied. He sacrificed so that Dad could have opportunities he never had. I'm honoring that legacy by refusing to sacrifice opportunities that could benefit all of us in the long run. My mother abruptly stood and walked to the window, her back to us as she spoke. What about Vanessa's wedding? She's counting on the arrangements we've made. We can't possibly tell her now that her dream day needs to be downgraded. Actually, you can and should, I replied. The current plans are financially unsustainable regardless of my involvement. Continuing with them will only deepen the problems you're already facing. So, you're punishing your sister because you're angry with us, my father concluded, attempting another angle of emotional manipulation. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm acknowledging reality and suggesting we all do the same. Vanessa's wedding should reflect your actual resources, not a fantasy funded by my stolen savings. As if summoned by our discussion, the front door opened, and Vanessa's voice called out cheerfully, "Hello? We brought dessert." My sister and Jason appeared in the doorway moments later, carrying a bakery box and wearing matching expressions. of surprise at the obvious tension in the room. "Oh, are we interrupting?" Vanessa asked, her gaze moving between our faces. "Not at all," my mother said quickly, composing her expression. "We were just discussing Olivia's job offer in New York." "You got it? That's amazing," Jason said with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm. "Horizon Media is incredible. When would you start?" 3 weeks, I replied, grateful for his positive response. "It's an accelerated timeline, but an exceptional opportunity." Vanessa's face fell. "But the wedding, you'll still be here for all the planning, right? And the bachelorette weekend in Sedona next month? We've already booked everything." Before I could respond, my mother seized the opening. "That's exactly what we've been discussing. This job offer has complicated all our plans. Olivia feels her career should take priority over family commitments." The subtle repositioning was expertly done, casting me as choosing career over family rather than establishing necessary boundaries after a significant financial violation. Vanessa's expression shifted from disappointment to hurt, while Jason looked confused. "I thought the issue was about the money that was taken from Olivia's account," he said, demonstrating more awareness of the situation than I had realized. "The wedding plans have already been scaled back based on our conversation after dinner the other night." My mother flushed slightly. "We're discussing several issues simultaneously. The wedding, the house sale, Olivia's job, the retirement, community. Everything is connected." "Actually," I said, reclaiming the narrative, "the primary issue is straightforward. My savings were taken without permission for purposes I didn't authorize. I'm establishing clear boundaries about my finances moving forward while offering several options for resolving the immediate situation." Jason nodded thoughtfully. "That seems reasonable. Vanessa and I have already agreed that we can cover more of the wedding costs ourselves. Her dress is being altered instead of buying new, and we've found a more affordable venue that's actually more in line with what we wanted anyway." This was news to me, and evidently to my parents as well, based on their expressions. "You've changed the venue?" my mother asked, her voice rising slightly. "Without discussing it with us? We've already put deposits down. Most of which are refundable if canceled within 90 days, Jason replied calmly. "I reviewed the contracts last week. We'll lose about $2,000 on non-refundable deposits, which Vanessa and I will cover." My sister, looking uncomfortable but resolute, added, "Mom, we talked about this. The lakeside venue was your dream, not mine. Jason and I prefer the garden space at Ellerton House. It's more intimate and significantly less expensive." The dynamic in the room had shifted unexpectedly. Rather than the united family front I had anticipated facing alone, cracks were appearing in what I had always perceived as monolithic opposition to my perspective. "This is absurd," my father declared, standing abruptly. "First, Olivia abandons us for New York. Now you're dismantling wedding plans we've worked on for months. Does family commitment mean nothing to either of you?" His outburst hung in the air, revealing more nakedly than before the emotional manipulation underlying our family's financial dysfunctions. In the uncomfortable silence that followed, I realized we had reached the crucial moment, the point where old patterns would either reassert themselves or give way to something healthier. "Dad," I said quietly, "commitment doesn't mean blind adherence to unsustainable plans. It means caring enough to face reality together and find solutions that truly benefit everyone in the long term." Jason, still holding the dessert box, nodded in agreement. "Sir, I believe that's exactly what we're all trying to do here." The morning after the confrontation at my parents' house, I woke early with a curious sense of lightness despite the emotional turmoil of the previous evening. The conversation had ended without resolution, my father retreating to his workshop, my mother busying herself in the kitchen, Vanessa and Jason making an awkward early departure. I had left with promises to continue the discussion later, but the fundamental dynamics had been exposed in ways that couldn't be easily dismissed or papered over. As I prepared for work, my phone rang with a name I hadn't seen on my caller ID in months: Dr. Elaine Winters. During a particularly stressful period 2 years earlier, I had briefly seen Dr. Winters for therapy, stopping after just 6 sessions when family financial demands made the expense seem unjustifiable. Now, seeing her name, I felt a momentary confusion before answering. "Olivia, it's Dr. Winters. I hope I'm not calling too early." "Not at all," I replied, genuinely pleased to hear her voice. "This is unexpected. I'm reaching out because I had a cancellation this morning and remembered our conversations about family financial dynamics. You were dealing with similar challenges then, and I recently published an article on financial enmeshment in families that made me think of your situation. The coincidence seemed almost too perfect." "That's remarkably timely, actually. I'm in the middle of a significant family financial conflict right now." "I thought that might be the case," she said. "These patterns tend to recur until they're addressed at the root. I have a 9 a.m. opening if you'd like to come in. No pressure or obligation for ongoing sessions, just a chance to discuss your current situation with someone familiar with the background." I glanced at my calendar. My first meeting wasn't until 11, and given the magnitude of changes I was navigating, professional perspective seemed invaluable. "I'd appreciate that very much. Thank you for thinking of me." Dr. Winter's office was exactly as I remembered: warm lighting, comfortable seating, and an atmosphere of calm thoughtfulness. As I settled into the familiar armchair across from her, I felt myself release some of the tension I'd been carrying. "So," she began after our initial greetings, "tell me, what's happening now with your family's financial expectations?" For the next 20 minutes, I outlined the situation: my parents taking my house fund, the wedding expenses, the retirement community plans, and the horizon opportunity. Dr. Winters listened attentively, occasionally making notes but mostly maintaining the engaged, non-judgmental presence that had made our previous sessions valuable. "What strikes me," she said when I had finished, "is how clearly you're seeing the patterns now compared to when we first met. 2 years ago, you described similar behaviors, but with significant self-doubt about your right to establish boundaries. The horizon opportunity changed something fundamental for me," I acknowledged. "It created enough distance, both literally and figuratively, to see these dynamics more objectively." Dr. Winters nodded. "External catalysts often provide the perspective we can't achieve from within entrenched systems. What I'm hearing in your description now is recognition not just of your parents' financial mismanagement, but of your own participation in enabling patterns." "Exactly. I've been the reliable solution for so long that it became my identity within the family, the responsible one who would always sacrifice to keep things functioning. That's what I call a load-bearing role in family systems," Dr. Winters explained. "When one member consistently bears the weight of family dysfunction, removing that support feels threatening to everyone, including, often, the person in that role. Your identity becomes tied to being the solution, making it difficult to step away even when it's clearly harmful." This characterization resonated powerfully. "That explains why this feels like more than just a financial conflict. It's almost as though I'm betraying who I'm supposed to be in the family." Precisely. Family systems resist change because each member, regardless of how dysfunctional their role might be, derives some form of stability or identity from the existing patterns. Your parents gain financial security and the ability to maintain appearances. Your sister receives preferential treatment and material benefits. And you, what have you gained from this arrangement? The question caught me off guard. Gained? I've mostly lost. Money, opportunities, independence. Yet you participated willingly for years, Dr. Winters observed without judgment. What emotional need was being met through that participation? I considered this deeply, recognizing the importance of honesty in this moment. Approval, I suppose, or at least the absence of disappointment, being the good daughter who could be counted on when everyone else fell short. That's insightful, she affirmed. Many people in load-bearing family roles find their value in being needed rather than in being authentically seen and appreciated. Breaking that pattern means risking the loss of your established value in the family system. This perspective illuminated something I hadn't fully articulated. My fear wasn't just about financial conflict or family disapproval, but about who I would be if not the reliable problem solver. The Horizon opportunity challenged not just my geographical location, but my fundamental identity within my family. So, how do I navigate this transition? I asked. I'm committed to accepting the position and establishing healthier boundaries, but I don't want to destroy my family relationships in the process. Dr. Winters leaned forward slightly. That's where many people mistakenly create a false dichotomy: healthy boundaries versus family connection. The reality is that authentic, sustainable relationships require boundaries to flourish. Without them, connection becomes obligation, resentment accumulates, and genuine intimacy becomes impossible. She reached for a book on her shelf and handed it to me. This explores family financial enmeshment specifically. You might find it helpful for understanding the emotional and psychological dimensions of your situation. The key insight is that financial entanglement often serves as a proxy for deeper emotional patterns that need addressing. I accepted the book, Unbalanced Equations, Breaking Free from Family Financial Enmeshment, with genuine appreciation. Thank you. This looks incredibly relevant. One final thought before our time concludes, Dr. Winters offered. Consider that your Horizon opportunity represents more than career advancement or geographical distance. It's a chance to model a different way of being for your entire family, one where genuine success and healthy boundaries coexist with authentic connection. Those words stayed with me throughout the day, through meetings and client calls that now seemed strangely disconnected from the profound shifts occurring in my personal understanding. During lunch, I began reading the book Dr. Winters had recommended, finding validation and insight in its exploration of family financial patterns. One passage particularly resonated. Financial enmeshment in families often reflects generational patterns where money functions as a substitute for emotional expression. When parents use financial support or demand as a primary language of love or approval, children learn to equate financial compliance with family belonging. Breaking this cycle requires establishing not just financial boundaries, but new languages for expressing care and connection. That evening, seeking additional perspective, I reached out to my closest friend Rachel, who lived in Boston. Unlike my other friendships, which had gradually diminished as family obligations consumed my time and energy, Rachel had consistently maintained our connection despite geographical distance and my frequent cancellations. I've been waiting years for this call, she said after I explained the situation. Not the crisis part. That's awful and I'm furious on your behalf. But the part where you finally recognize how one-sided this family dynamic has always been. You saw this happening? I asked, surprised by her certainty. Liv, we've been friends since college. I've watched you cancel plans for family emergencies that were entirely predictable consequences of their choices. I've seen you defer your own goals repeatedly while they pursued whatever they wanted. Remember when you passed on that Chicago opportunity 4 years ago because your dad was expanding the catering business and needed your support? I did remember. A digital marketing position that had offered substantial advancement, but required relocation. I had declined without serious consideration, automatically prioritizing my local availability to my family. The thing that's always bothered me, Rachel continued, isn't that you helped your family? It's that the help only flowed one way. When you had pneumonia last winter and I wanted to come help, You insisted you were fine handling it alone. Meanwhile, your sister was posting Instagram stories from a spa weekend with your mom while you were sick. Her recollection of that incident, which I had normalized at the time, struck me with new force. I had been seriously ill, alone in my apartment with a fever that made basic tasks difficult, while my mother and sister enjoyed a girls' weekend they had been planning for months. I hadn't even considered asking them to postpone, automatically assuming my illness was my problem to manage. I didn't see it clearly then, I admitted. It seemed normal that I would handle my own problems while helping with theirs. That's the part that makes me angry, Rachel said with the frank affection of long friendship. Not that they asked for help, families do that, but that it never occurred to them to offer help in return. Real families support each other reciprocally. They recognize each other's dreams and sacrifices. Her perspective as someone who had observed our family dynamics from outside the system offered clarity I couldn't achieve alone. Rachel had seen patterns I had normalized, inequities I had accepted as natural, sacrifices I had made without recognition or reciprocation. The Horizon offer is your chance to break this pattern, she continued. Not just for yourself, but for them too. Your parents need to develop realistic financial habits. Your sister needs to recognize that actions have consequences. And you need to discover who you are outside of being their safety net. But what if the relationship doesn't survive the transition? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. What if establishing boundaries means losing my family? Rachel's response was gentle but firm. Ask yourself this: is what you currently have, where your value is measured by your utility, where your boundaries are routinely violated, where your dreams are considered optional while theirs are essential, actually a relationship worth preserving in its current form? The question landed with uncomfortable force. I do love them, I said after a moment. Despite everything. Of course you do, Rachel affirmed. Love isn't the issue here. The issue is whether that love can evolve into something healthier for everyone. Real love seeks growth, not stagnation. It wants the best for others, not just what's convenient. After our call ended, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, integrating these various perspectives: Dr. Winters's professional insights, the book's analysis of financial enmeshment patterns, Rachel's observations as a long-standing friend, Catherine Williams' example of successful family reconfiguration, and Gabriella's wisdom about supporting from strength rather than sacrifice. Each viewpoint illuminated different aspects of my situation, creating a more complete picture than I could have developed alone. Together, they confirmed what my own analysis had suggested. The patterns that had governed my family relationships weren't just financially unsustainable. They were emotionally and psychologically damaging to everyone involved, including those who seemed to benefit most. The fundamental question wasn't whether to accept the Horizon position or establish financial boundaries. Those decisions had crystallized into certainty. The real question was how to navigate the transition in ways that opened possibilities for healthier relationships rather than simply severing existing ones. As darkness fell, I began drafting a letter to my parents, not an email or text that could be misinterpreted or dismissed, but a formal letter expressing both my decisions and my hopes for our future relationship. The process of articulating these thoughts helped clarify my own understanding and commitment to the path ahead. I wrote not from anger or resentment, though those emotions had certainly been present throughout this process, but from a place of emerging clarity about what genuine family support could and should look like. I acknowledged their fears and concerns while firmly establishing my boundaries. Most importantly, I expressed hope that this transition, though difficult, could ultimately lead to relationships based on mutual respect rather than dependence and obligation. The perspectives I had gathered that day offered something beyond validation or strategy. They provided a vision of what might be possible if I held firm through the challenging transition ahead. They helped me see that establishing boundaries wasn't an act of abandonment, but potentially the most genuine expression of care I could offer my family, the opportunity to develop healthier patterns that could benefit everyone. With that understanding, I felt prepared to face whatever resistance would come, not from a position of anger or defiance, but from the calm certainty that sometimes the most loving choice is also the most difficult. The letter sat on my dining table for 3 days, sealed in an envelope addressed to my parents. During those days, I moved methodically through the necessary preparations for my transition, giving notice at my current position, signing and returning the formal offer from Horizon, researching housing options in New York, and beginning the process of organizing my apartment for the move. My phone accumulated missed calls and messages from my family. My mother's texts oscillated between guilt trips, "Your father barely slept last night worrying about the future," and tempting offers, "We found the perfect condo near us you could afford with your current salary." My father's voicemails were brief and businesslike, proposing compromise solutions that invariably involved me staying local and continuing my role as family financial backstop. Vanessa's messages were more emotional, focusing on her disappointment that I would miss pre-wedding events and her fear that everything is falling apart. I responded only with brief acknowledgments that I had received their messages and would be in touch soon. This uncharacteristic distance, my family was accustomed to immediate responses and swift problem-solving from me, generated increasing urgency in their communications. By the 3rd day, my mother was calling hourly, and my father had escalated to suggesting he would come to my apartment if I didn't respond substantively. The moment had come to deliver the letter and have the conversation that would irrevocably change our family dynamic. Rather than delivering it to their home, where the familiar environment would reinforce existing patterns, I suggested meeting at Riverside Park, neutral territory that offered both privacy and the calming presence of nature. When I arrived at the designated bench overlooking the river, I was surprised to find only my father waiting. He stood as I approached, his expression a mixture of concern and determination. "Your mother couldn't bring herself to come," he explained, after our awkward greeting. "She's convinced you've already made up your mind regardless of what we say." "She's right about that," I acknowledged, taking a seat beside him. "I've accepted the position with Horizon. I'm moving to New York in 18 days. He nodded as though this confirmation was both expected and painful. "I suspected as much. Your mother held out hope that you might reconsider once you'd had time to reflect on family obligations." "Dad, I've been reflecting on family obligations for my entire adult life," I replied, removing the envelope from my bag. "I've written everything down to ensure clarity. I'd like you to read this before we continue our conversation." He accepted the envelope with resignation, unfolding the pages inside and adjusting his reading glasses. As he read, I watched his expression shift, from defensive preparation to surprise, then thoughtful consideration, and finally a complex emotion I couldn't quite identify. The letter had 3 sections. The first detailed my decision to accept the Horizon position, emphasizing the professional opportunity and long-term benefits it represented. The second addressed the financial situation directly, outlining my requirements for repayment of the taken funds through a structured agreement, with specific terms and timelines. The third and longest section explored the patterns that had characterized our family dynamic and proposed a new framework for our relationship moving forward, one based on mutual respect, appropriate boundaries, and genuine support rather than financial dependence. I had concluded with a vision of what our family might become if we navigated this transition successfully, how authentic relationships built on respect rather than obligation could ultimately bring us closer in the ways that truly mattered. When he finished reading, my father folded the pages carefully and returned them to the envelope before speaking. "You write very persuasively," he said finally. "Your mother should read this too. It Clarifies things I don't think we've been willing to see. His response wasn't what I had anticipated, not defensive justification or emotional manipulation, but a quiet acknowledgement that suggested possible openness to change. "I'm glad it resonated with you," I replied carefully, not wanting to overinterpret his reaction. I spent a lot of time thinking about how to express both my decisions and my hopes for our relationship. "That comes through," he said, staring out at the river. "Especially the part about learning to support each other in ways that create growth rather than dependence." That struck home. He fell silent for several moments before continuing. "You know, my father, your grandfather, never took a dime from anyone. Worked 2 jobs for 40 years, saved carefully, helped me through college without incurring debt. I always assumed I was following his example of family dedication." "You were," I affirmed, "but perhaps not in the ways you thought. Grandpa's dedication manifested as personal responsibility and careful stewardship to create opportunities for the next generation. That's the legacy I'm trying to honor, too." My father turned to face me directly. "Your mother and we lost sight of the difference between supporting our children and expecting our children to support us. Somewhere along the way, our financial difficulties became your problem to solve, rather than our responsibility to address." His candor surprised and moved me. This wasn't the defensive father I had prepared to face, but a man capable of honest reflection when confronted with uncomfortable truths. "I never minded helping," I said, wanting to acknowledge the complexity of my own feelings. What became difficult was the assumption that my resources were communal property, while my needs were individual responsibilities. The inequality of expectation, not the help itself. He nodded slowly. "Your sister has been the beneficiary of that inequality her entire life. We did her no favors by creating different standards." "No," I agreed, "you didn't. And I participated in that system too by accepting my role as the responsible one who would always make sacrifices when needed. We've all contributed to patterns that ultimately harm everyone." A jogger passed our bench, momentarily interrupting our conversation. When they had moved beyond earshot, my father spoke again. "So what happens now, with the money, I mean? The house sale is proceeding, but as you correctly noted in your letter, it won't generate enough to cover both repayment and the Westview deposit." This was the moment of truth, where my commitment to changing patterns would be tested against the practical financial realities my family faced. "I've outlined a structured repayment plan in the letter," I explained. "You'll use the house proceeds to repay a significant portion immediately, with the remainder converted to a formal loan with reasonable terms and interest. I've created a time frame that allows you to meet obligations without requiring ongoing support from me." "And Westview Village?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Isn't financially viable for you right now," I finished gently. "The math simply doesn't work, Dad. Even if I were staying and willing to subsidize indefinitely, the monthly costs exceed your income by a margin that would eventually deplete all resources." He sighed heavily. "Your mother has her heart set on that community, the amenities, the social status, the lifestyle." "I understand," I acknowledged, "but pursuing appearances at the expense of financial reality is exactly what created this situation. There are other retirement options that would provide comfort and security within your actual means." "Such as?" "I've researched several," I replied, removing a folder from my bag. "This one in particular, Orchard Grove, offers similar amenities to Westview, but at approximately 60% of the cost. The units are smaller but well-designed, and the location is actually closer to Vanessa's new place than Westview would be." My father accepted the folder with a mixture of resignation and curiosity. "You've been thorough. I want you and Mom to be secure and comfortable," I said, ensuring he understood my motivation. I'm not abandoning you to financial hardship. I'm proposing sustainable solutions rather than temporary fixes that postpone inevitable problems. As he reviewed the materials I'd prepared, a text message appeared on my phone from my boss. Meridian loved the campaign proposal. Contract. Signed for full implementation. Congratulations. The timing felt symbolic. Professional validation, arriving precisely as I was establishing new boundaries with my family. 6 months ago, I would have downplayed this achievement when sharing it with my parents, knowing their response would focus on Vanessa's wedding plans or their own financial needs, rather than my professional accomplishment. Today, I allowed myself a moment of genuine pride before turning back to my father. Dad, I just received great news. The Meridian campaign I developed has been approved for full implementation. It's a significant achievement that will likely lead to industry recognition. His response surprised me again. That's wonderful, Olivia. You've always been exceptionally talented in your field. I'm proud of what you've accomplished professionally, even if I haven't always shown it adequately. The acknowledgement, simple but sincere, affected me more deeply than I had anticipated. Thank you. That means a lot to me. We sat in companionable silence for several minutes, watching boats navigate the river current. Finally, my father closed the retirement community folder and faced me again. I think I understand what you're trying to do, he said carefully. Not just establishing financial boundaries, but creating space for a different kind of relationship, one where we celebrate each other's achievements and support growth rather than enable stagnation. Exactly, I affirmed, moved by his perception. I don't want to lose my connection with you and Mom and Vanessa. I just want that connection to be based on mutual respect rather than financial entanglement. It won't be easy, he warned. Your mother's identity is deeply tied to appearances and status. Accepting financial limitations means confronting uncomfortable truths about choices we've made for decades. I know, I acknowledged, and I don't expect immediate transformation, just willingness to begin the process of change. For what? It's worth, he said after another thoughtful pause. I agree with everything you've written here. The patterns you've identified are accurate, and your proposed solutions are fair. I'll speak with your mother and help her understand that this isn't abandonment, but an opportunity for healthier relationships moving forward. His support, unexpected but profoundly welcome, lifted a weight I had been carrying since discovering the withdrawal from my account. For the first time, I felt genuine hope that change might be possible. Not instantly or without difficulty, but gradually through consistent boundaries and new patterns of interaction. What about Vanessa's wedding? I asked, addressing the remaining elephant in the room. My father chuckled softly. Ironically, Jason's parents called yesterday offering to cover more of the expenses. Apparently, they've been uncomfortable with Vanessa's discomfort about the financial strain. Your sister initially refused out of pride, but after our family dinner the other night, she's reconsidering. That's positive, I noted. It suggests she's developing more awareness of financial realities, too. Perhaps, he agreed. Though, I think she's mainly motivated by wanting a wedding that doesn't come with family conflict as the background music. We both smiled at this characterization, finding unexpected common ground in this moment of candor. As our conversation drew to a close and we prepared to part ways, my father did something he hadn't done in years. He hugged me, a genuine embrace rather than the perfunctory greeting or farewell that had become our norm. I'm sorry we took your savings, he said quietly. It was wrong, regardless of intentions or circumstances. You deserved better from the people who should protect your interests, not exploit your success. The simple acknowledgement and apology, offered without qualification or expectation, represented more meaningful progress than any financial agreement could have achieved. It suggested capability for change that I had almost stopped believing possible. Walking back to my car, I felt the weight of decades-long patterns beginning to shift. The turning point wasn't just my decision to accept the horizon position or establish financial boundaries. It was the choice to believe that different relationships were possible if I held firm through the discomfort of transition. This wouldn't be the end of challenging conversations or attempts to revert to established patterns. My mother's resistance would likely prove more entrenched than my father's surprising openness to change. Vanessa's journey toward financial responsibility had only just begun. The road ahead contained unavoidable difficulties as we all learned new ways of relating to each other. But something fundamental had shifted in this riverside conversation, a recognition that the patterns binding us had been constructed together and could be reconstructed with intention and courage. The decision to stand firmly in my worth while maintaining compassion for everyone involved wasn't abandoning my family. It was inviting them into a new, more authentic form of connection. As I drove home, I felt not just the relief of having navigated a difficult conversation, but genuine excitement about possibilities I hadn't previously allowed myself to imagine. A career that fulfilled my potential, financial independence that reflected my efforts, and family relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The turning point decision wasn't choosing career over family or boundaries over connection. It was choosing authenticity over comfort, growth over stagnation, and long-term health over short-term harmony. It was, perhaps for the first time, choosing to value myself with the same commitment I had always directed toward others. The 2 weeks following my conversation with my father unfolded with the simultaneous intensity of professional transition and family reconfiguration. Each day brought new developments that tested my commitment to the boundaries I had established while revealing unexpected outcomes of that pivotal riverside discussion. 3 days after our meeting, my mother finally reached out. Her voicemail, left while I was in a transition meeting at work, captured the complex emotions she was processing. "Olivia, I've read your letter. Twice, actually. Your father insists we need to respect your decisions even if we don't agree with them. I'm trying to understand. The Orchard Grove brochures you provided look nice, though, of course, it's not Westview. I've scheduled a tour for Thursday. Call me when you can." Her message lacked the emotional manipulation I had come to expect, suggesting my father had indeed advocated for the perspective shift I had proposed. When I returned her call that evening, our conversation was stilted but substantive. She acknowledged the financial realities outlined in my letter, even as she expressed disappointment about adjusting retirement expectations. "I suppose we've been living beyond our means for some time," she admitted with uncharacteristic candor. "Your father's business hasn't been profitable for years, but we kept expecting it to turn around rather than adapting to our actual circumstances." "That pattern is common," I offered, wanting to normalize rather than criticize. "Many people struggle to adjust lifestyle expectations when financial realities change." "Perhaps," she conceded, "but most people don't raid their daughters' savings to maintain appearances." That was inexcusable. I should have consulted you before making that withdrawal. The acknowledgement, while falling short of a full apology, represented significant progress. My mother had always justified financial decisions with unwavering certainty, rarely admitting error even when consequences proved her wrong. This partial acknowledgement suggested potential for the growth I had hoped might emerge from this crisis. "I appreciate you recognizing that," I replied. "Moving forward, I believe we can establish healthier patterns if we maintain open communication about financial realities." "You sound like that financial advisor your father insisted we meet yesterday," she said with a hint of her usual defensiveness. He used those exact words, financial realities, as though money matters more than family milestones. "It's not about prioritizing money over milestones," I explained patiently. "It's about ensuring that celebrating those milestones doesn't create lasting financial damage that ultimately undermines family security." Our conversation continued in this vein, moments of insight interspersed with reversion to established perspectives. By its conclusion, we had reached tentative agreement on several key points. They would tour alternative retirement communities. The formal loan agreement would be established for the remaining balance of my funds after the house sale, and my relocation would proceed as planned. The most surprising development came the following day when Vanessa appeared at my apartment unannounced, bearing takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant and an expression of uncharacteristic humility. "Peace offering," she said, holding up the bag as I opened the door. "Jason thought we should talk before you leave for New York." Over dinner at my small kitchen table, my sister revealed dimensions of her perspective I had never fully considered. "I've been thinking about what you said about different standards and expectations," she began after we had settled with our food. "About how I was allowed to pursue what I wanted while you were expected to be the responsible one. That's been our family dynamic for as long as I can remember," I acknowledged. "I know," she nodded. "And I benefited from it without questioning whether it was fair." Jason pointed out something I never realized: how much pressure that pattern placed on both of us. I got to be perpetually childlike, never fully developing independence, while you never got to explore or take risks because you were too busy being the family safety net. Her insight surprised me. Vanessa had always seemed comfortably ensconced in her role as the family favorite, accepting advantages without questioning their impact on either of us. "That's remarkably perceptive," I said carefully. "Don't sound so shocked," she replied with a small smile. "I'm capable of self-reflection occasionally, especially when my fiancé points out uncomfortable truths about family dynamics." "Jason seems like a stabilizing influence," I observed. "He is," she agreed. "His family operates completely differently from ours. They discuss money openly, make decisions collectively, and respect each other's goals equally. It's weird, but kind of amazing." As we continued talking, Vanessa shared that she and Jason had indeed decided to accept his parents' offer to help with wedding costs while simultaneously scaling back plans to more reasonable proportions. "The lakeside venue was Mom's vision, not mine," she admitted. "I actually prefer the garden setting at Ellerton House. It's more intimate, and honestly, I don't need 400 guests to validate my relationship." "That's a healthy perspective," I noted, genuinely impressed by this evolution in my sister's thinking. "Don't get too excited," she cautioned with characteristic frankness. "I'm still having the designer dress and the live band. But we're cutting the guest list by half and eliminating the ice sculpture Mom insisted would make a statement, whatever that means." We laughed together, finding unexpected common ground in recognizing our mother's preoccupation with appearances. As the evening progressed, our conversation turned to my upcoming move and the horizon opportunity. "I'm sorry I reacted badly to your job news," Vanessa said. "I was focused on how it affected my wedding plans rather than what it meant for your career. That was selfish." "It was a natural reaction given our established patterns," I replied, choosing generosity over grudges. "We've all been conditioned to view family decisions through specific lenses." "Well, I'm trying to adjust my prescription," she quipped. "Jason thinks it's important that I develop more awareness of how my choices affect others." Before leaving, Vanessa handed me an envelope. "This is a start," she said somewhat awkwardly. "Not the full amount I've borrowed over the years, but what I can manage right now. I've set up a monthly transfer for the rest." Inside was a check for $3,000, nowhere near the total she had borrowed for various emergencies over the years, but a meaningful gesture nonetheless. More significant than the amount was the initiative it represented, a step toward personal responsibility taken without external pressure. "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved. "This means a lot." "Don't make it weird," she replied with her usual deflective humor, though her expression revealed the sincerity beneath. "Just promise you'll still be my maid of honor, even if you're doing it remotely from New York most of the time. Of course, I assured her. Distance doesn't change what matters. As the days passed and my departure date approached, the practical realities of my transition intensified. My apartment was gradually transformed by packing boxes and sorting decisions. My professional responsibilities shifted toward knowledge, transfer, and transition planning. My communication with Horizon focused on relocation logistics and onboarding preparation. Throughout this whirlwind of activity, I maintained clear boundaries with my family while remaining engaged with the evolving situation. My father sent regular updates about their house sale, proceeding on schedule, retirement community exploration, Orchard Grove had become a serious contender, and the formalization of our financial agreement, drafted by a neutral third-party attorney per my request. My mother's communications oscillated between acceptance and attempts to revert to established patterns. One day, she would share positive impressions of Orchard Grove's amenities. The next, she would suggest I reconsider the timing of my move, given Vanessa's wedding preparations. These fluctuations were predictable aspects of a difficult transition rather than signals of fundamental resistance to change. The most challenging moment came 3 days before my scheduled departure, when my parents invited me to a family dinner to discuss final arrangements. Despite my initial wariness about potential manipulation, I accepted the invitation with clear parameters about what would and wouldn't be open for discussion. When I arrived at their home, now bearing a sold sign in the front yard, I was surprised to find not just my parents and Vanessa, but also Jason and his parents, whom I had met only briefly at the engagement announcement. We thought it was important for everyone to be part of this conversation, my father explained as he greeted me. Since we're all connected by Vanessa and Jason's relationship, and financial decisions affect everyone, the inclusion of Jason's parents, successful professionals who had modeled healthy financial management for their son, struck me as a strategic choice on my father's part. Their presence would naturally discourage manipulation tactics while providing examples of productive financial communication within families. The dinner proceeded with remarkable civility. My mother had prepared a modest meal rather than the elaborate spread that typically characterized family gatherings. My father presented the finalized repayment agreement for my review and signature. Most surprisingly, my parents announced their decision to purchase a condominium at Orchard Grove, a choice that represented significant adjustment of expectations, but demonstrated commitment to financial reality. We toured 3 different communities, my mother explained with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm. Orchard Grove actually has several advantages over Westview: better location relative to shopping, more diverse residents, and significantly more reasonable monthly fees. Jason's father, a financial advisor by profession, offered supportive feedback on their decision. Retirement planning is about sustainability, not just immediate comfort. This choice positions you for long-term security rather than short-term status. The conversation flowed with surprising ease between topics: the wedding plans, my upcoming move, the logistics of my parents' downsizing process, and the timeline for transitioning financial responsibilities. Throughout the evening, I observed subtle but significant shifts in family interaction patterns. My father consistently deferred to my mother's agency rather than speaking for her about financial matters. My mother acknowledged financial limitations without defensive justification. Vanessa actively participated in budget discussions rather than detaching from boring financial topics. Each small change reflected movement toward healthier family dynamics. As the evening concluded and preparations were made for departure, my mother drew me aside for a private conversation on the back patio, the same space where our conflict had erupted weeks earlier. "I want you to know," she began with uncharacteristic hesitation, "that I've been seeing someone, a therapist, to discuss some of my difficulties with financial reality and appearance management." Her disclosure stunned me. My mother had always dismissed therapy as unnecessary navel-gazing for people too weak to handle their own problems. "That's a courageous step," I replied. genuinely impressed by this unexpected development. Your letter made me realize some uncomfortable truths about my priorities, she continued. I've spent decades focusing on how things appear rather than what they actually are. That pattern affected not just our finances, but our relationship with you girls, measuring your value by how you reflected on us rather than supporting your individual paths. Her insight and vulnerability moved me deeply. I appreciate you sharing that with me, Mom. It means a lot. I'm not saying I've transformed overnight, she cautioned with a small smile. I still think Westview would have been lovely, and I still wish you weren't moving so far away. But I'm trying to see beyond my immediate reactions to understand the larger patterns. That's all anyone can ask, I assured her. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the remarkable shifts that had occurred in just a few short weeks. The family that had seemed immovably entrenched in dysfunctional patterns had demonstrated unexpected capacity for growth when confronted with both clear boundaries and compassionate perspective. The changes weren't complete or perfect. My mother still occasionally slipped into manipulative language. My father sometimes deferred to her preferences despite financial contraindications. Vanessa's commitment to financial responsibility remained untested by significant challenges. The structures of our family dynamic had been modified, but not completely transformed. Yet genuine progress had undeniably occurred. The rigid system that had constrained all of us, casting me perpetually as the responsible problem solver, Vanessa as the entitled favorite, my father as the conflict-avoidant enabler, and my mother as the appearance-focused director, had developed new flexibility. Alternative roles and interactions had become possible, creating space for authentic connection beyond established patterns. My apartment, now half-packed for the impending move, represented not just professional transition, but liberation from geographical and psychological constraints. The boundaries I had established had not destroyed family relationships as I had feared, but had instead created conditions for potentially healthier connections. As I carefully wrapped framed photographs for packing, images of family gatherings that had often masked underlying tensions, I recognized that this transitional period represented not an ending, but a beginning. We were all embarking on a journey toward more authentic relationships, learning to connect through respect and mutual support rather than financial entanglement and obligation. The immediate aftermath of my decision had brought not the catastrophic rupture I had feared nor the instant transformation I had secretly hoped for, but something more realistic and ultimately more promising. The first tentative steps toward genuine change, taken with both determination and compassion by each member of our imperfect evolving family. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.